Kill him, Angron. Kill him for me.
Well, it's finally here. The Great Angel versus the Red Angel. What can I say? I guess, welcome to Fightmaster, the show where we analyze the galaxy's greatest warriors and break down their most iconic duels. And I'm not sure it gets much more iconic than this one. A clash between brothers. A clash between monstrously powerful demi-gods. An earth-shattering war of attrition between a creature that can never die, and one fated to. On the side of the Loyalists, the Great Angel, the Lord of Baal, Primarch of the Blood Angels Legion, Sanguinius. Representing the traitors, the Lord of Red Sands, the Red Angel, the Primarch Demon of the World Eaters, Angron. This was one of the most challenging but also funnest Fightmasters to make. How does one break down the style of these combatants? Perhaps more than any beings in 40k, these two defy analysis, though for very different reasons. Before I continue, standard Primarch disclaimer: when I talk about things like skill, style, speed, strength, etc., I'm talking about in relation to other Primarchs or beings comparable to them. Obviously, for most things, a Primarch is simply death incarnate. Starting with the Great Angel, Sanguinius, is, if forced into human terms, a stick-and-move fighter on the grandest of scales. A variation on outside fighting, the stick-and-move fighter tends to stay outside the enemy's threat range until they believe an opportunity is available. Constantly moving while at range, the stick-and-move fighter harasses their enemy with fast, long-range attacks before dancing back away from a counterstrike. Ideally, they seek to create this frustrating dynamic, where the opponent is forced to follow the stick-and-move fighter, growing increasingly wild or desperate as they're worn down at range, with their own attacks generally hitting air. Once this infuriating dance has created an opening, the stick-and-move fighter tends to either stand their ground when expected to move away again, firing a powerful attack on the opponent as they attempt to engage, or they come forward with a devastating strikes or series of strikes depending on whatever opening they have perceived, before once again moving out of range. This is how Sanguinius prefers to fight, a style that exemplifies clean techniques and control of both oneself and the battlefield. But, like all styles of fighting, it can be countered, most commonly by a foe fast enough or clever enough to cut off the stick-and-move fighter rather than chase them. Should this happen, or the situation simply call for it, the Great Angel is more than happy to abandon this style and unleash his rage from point-blank distance, grappling and fighting for control of his opponent's limbs in frenetic scrambles, whilst battering at his foe with his massive wings. While grappling, once he has the superior position, Sanguinius will usually attack with vicious elbows and short-range punches of surprising power. But, when engaged like this, his monstrous side is most on display, as the Angel will readily take any advantage and launch any attack he can. It may seem to an outside viewer that he has traded technique for aggression when the Angel engages in this sort of fighting. But Sanguinius uses the violent explosion of movement to disguise his intentions, until he can truly lock his foe into position. This takes a lot of skill, particularly against the things he does it against, stuff like Kabanda, the Bloodthirster. Generally wielding both the mighty straight-edge power sword known as the Blade and Carmine, and the ridiculously destructive Spear of Telesto, a weapon that can pierce the hide of titans. Swapping between these two weapons, or wielding each one-handed, allows the Primarch to adjust to many styles of opposition, or range of combat. It also means in a duel he can do what we call giving different looks. This is where the fighter switches styles and tactics mid-fight, so as not to become predictable, or to let their opposition settle into one of their own preferred tactics. Along with his bladed weapons, Sanguinius also carries Infernus, a melter pistol of such power it needs to be repaired each time it is used. Facing the Great Angel is the demon Primarch Angron, a creature that's fighting style is utterly formless. I don't mean in the cool Bruce Lee be like water kind of formless. He just doesn't have a style. Almost all notions of technique or strategy have been left behind with his mortality. At best, the Red Angel has a kind of demonic muscle memory, some minor instinct allowing for flashes of skill, timing, or the occasional low cunning. Even as a mortal, Angron struggled not to lose himself in the battle lust of the Butcher's Nails, the Dark Age technology aggression engine that had replaced much of his brain, not allowing the Primarch to think clearly. With his apotheosis, the device had been taken to new heights. Truly part of Angron's demonic corpus now, most of the Primarch's personality and identity had been subsumed by the simple aggression of the nails and the war god. You see, Khorne does not have an ironic sense of humor. The god of blood and battle has no need for tortured souls lamenting their new reality as his eternal slave. Nor does he care for paragons of delusion who raise themselves high and think their slavery princedom. What Khorne wants is weapons. And despite his utter lack of skill, there are few weapons more effective than the Lord of Red Sands. In his demonic form, Angron has become the pinnacle of the Berserker, a creature of incomprehensible power, able to shatter titans and crash through vehicles. A beast that can fly faster than the speed of sound and regenerate from almost any wound in seconds. On top of this, even if you do manage to destroy Angron, as a demon, he simply returns to the warp. Angron is armed with the roughly bust-sized demon blade known as Vuragath, or the Black Blade, not to be confused with Sigismund's The Black Sword. Jokes aside, the weapon is monstrous. Filled with a swarm of hungering demons, the Dark Mechanicus-built weapon easily overwhelms force fields and passes through armor. The sword is said to not cut so much as rend reality around it. So, yeah, the Red Angel does not have a style or favored technique really. Not a whole lot to analyze. But what need does he have of such things? Angron doesn't fight, he merely destroys. These two would meet mere hours before the end of the Horus Heresy, as the Blood Angels defended the Eternity Gate, the final edifice of defense of the Imperial Palace before one enters the Sanctum of the Emperor, the so-called Final Fortress. By this point, both Primarch and former Primarch had been fighting the forces of their enemy for days without respite. But where the constant warfare innervated Angron, Sanguinius is mortal-ish and does have a limit to his endurance, a limit that was in sight. Defending the Eternity Gate, the massive entryway to the Final Fortress, Sanguinius and the Blood Angels did their best to keep it open as long as possible, so that human defenders and civilians who were about to become defenders, along with Space Marines, could fall back to the temporary safety of the Emperor's sanctum. It was a near impossible task, as the Eternity Gate was assaulted by all manner of traitor Space Marines, supported by Titans, human traitors, and an infinite horde of demons, free now to attack that the Emperor's psychic shield was collapsing. So when finally, Angron and Sanguinius did clash, it was mere moments after the already overworked Sanguinius had defeated the mighty bloodthirster Ka Banda. Now he would face an even greater test. The War God's perfect berserker, fueled by the bloodiest human conflict ever fought, a being he once called brother. They met in the air, Sanguinius crashing into him before twisting away, taking the fight upwards. Angron misses with the first swing of his black blade, and the next, and the next. He misses with his first attempt to grab the great angel with his huge taloned hands, and the next, and the next. He misses with a combination of the two. Each time he comes into range, Sanguinius twists away, or tucks into a dive, or turns in the air too sharp, an angle for Angron to follow quickly. In a straight line, the Red Angel's huge wings can propel him faster than Sanguinius. But the Angel of Baal is far more agile, and has spent a lifetime in the air. With each failed attack, the nails in Angron's mind bite at him harder, urging him on. But it is Sanguinius who strikes the first significant blow. The blade in carmine slashing through Angron's face as the angel dives past him. The demon prince lashes out blindly, hitting air again, but moments later his vision returns, and his wound heals. The next time Angron gets into range with Sanguinius, he manages to finally get a hold of him, gripping the smaller Primarch in an embrace that sends them both tumbling through the air, smashing together into a cathedral atop a warlord titan. Already Sanguinius is slowing. Angron grabs a hold of him again, a clawed hand closing around the great angel's head, smashing his brother's skull into the mosaic floor again and again. On the fifth slam, Angron's arm does not rise. Instead, it disintegrates. Sanguinius has fired the Infernus, his one-use melter pistol of horrific power. At this range, it has no issue annihilating the demonic limb. Surging to his feet, the angel raises the blade in carmine and begins an assault on the one-armed Angron. The Lord of Red Sands brings his own blade to bear, and without conscious thought, deflects each blow of the flurry. It is not skill per se, but his sort of demonic ability to feel where the blows will land. The Red Angel simply knows where to put his sword in order to stop his brother's attacks. The sparks of their clashing blades trigger a fleeting memory in Angron. The ghost of sentience creeps back in for just a moment as he recalls his time leading the rebels upon Nuceria. It is a distraction he cannot afford. Sanguinius rams his sword through his brother's chest. Face to face, for just a moment, the great angel thinks he has won. But Angron does not fall. Cannot fall. The Angel of Baal rips his sword free, fleeing back into the sky. Angron gives chase, drawing energy from the war taking place beneath their feet. The demon is already regrowing its limb, the hole in its chest already closing. Sanguinius begins the dance again, diving and turning out of range as the Lord of Red Sands tries to come to grips with him once more. But it is slower than before, exertions and injury taking their toll on the great angel. Sanguinius dives low, skimming above the heads of the warring space marines. Angron gives chase. The angel launches upwards, seeking distance from his far less agile brother. The angel is forced to dodge anti-air fire. Angron ignores it. The same is true for a Space Marine Stormbird. Sanguinius dodges aside the airship as they duel. Angron crashes through it, barely even slowing. He will not give Sanguinius the space he desires. Not now. Not with victory closing in. Sanguinius tries to flee once more, diving into the burning cloud of a destroyed Titan. Angron sneers. The smoke cannot hide the angel from him. He sees his brother's soul. It does, however, hide the spear of Telesto, hurled by the angel as the Lord of Red Sands heedlessly pursues into the smoke. The massive spear punching through Angron's head and spine, stunning the demon and sending his momentarily paralyzed form plummeting into the warring space marines below. The impact shattering armor and ending lives. Thrashing and flopping about like a wounded animal, the demon eventually gets the spear free and regains his feet, his severed spine and ruined face reforming. Sanguinius follows his brother to the ground. not in a dive, but slow and regal, like the judgment of heaven. Before Angron is truly recovered, Sanguinius unleashes a furious assault with the blade in carmine. The Lord of Red Sands defends none of it. Great rents in his flesh free-forming again moments later. But Sanguinius cannot maintain the assault. Angron's sons, the World Eaters, threaten to overwhelm him, and even a moment's distraction is deadly against the Red Angel. Sanguinius leaps into the air once more, but this time Angron is ready. He will not chase the angel. Instead, he grasps the spear of Telesto from the ground and hurls the weapon at his flying brother with enough force that it breaks the sound barrier. At the last moment, the great angel twists in the air, grasping the weapon, crying with the strain of it as he rolls with the momental force of the flying spear, sending it lancing back down into Angron, pinning the former Primarch to the ground. As his brother flits away into the sky, Angron rips the weapon free of himself once more, tossing it aside. The wounds close again, of course, but slower. Is even he beginning to reach his limit? Or perhaps the energy being fed to him ebbs as the defenders cease their fight back. Either way, Angron cannot waste his strength chasing the angel again. Something like the ghost of a strategy forms in Angron's mind. The low cunning of the hunting beast he has become. He will make his brother come to him. Remaining on the ground, the Lord of Red Sands directs his rage to the Blood Angel Space Marines. They cannot hurt him, and they are not fast enough to flee him. His black blade reaps their lives with ease. The trap, if you can really call it that, works almost instantly. The great angel could not abandon his sons to the wrath of his brother. Leading Angron on a merry chase had ceased to be an option. Landing, Sanguinius and Angron met once more with a frenzied clash of swords. It was a fight Sanguinius could never hope to win. Superhuman as he was, the angel had passed his limit, and each movement of his sword came slower and slower. It was so close now. Victory. The Lord of Red Sands could taste it. Both warriors knew it. And Angron's last pseudo-tactic was ready to deploy. He would trade blood for opportunity, allowing the slowing angel to strike him with the knowledge his brother would not be able to pull his sword free in time to stop the brutal counter. So Angron allowed a thrust to bite deep into his chest, surging into the blade in carmine, letting it run him through to close the distance. With his free hand, the cornate demon gripped Sanguinius by the throat. With the other, he jammed his demonic sword hilt deep into the great angel's stomach. Releasing the weapon, he lifted his impaled brother to his face. Clawed fingers choking blood and breath from Sanguinius. Weakly, the angel whispered his name and reached out to the sneering demon. The Lord of Red Sands was disappointed. He had not expected such a weak display from his vaunted brother. What was Sanguinius' intention? A tender final touch? Was he seeking to strangle Angron in return? A futile gesture, as the demon no longer needs to breathe. A desperate warning psychically forced its way into what was left of Angron's mind. The Warmaster Horus could see what he could not. Sanguinius had not fallen to Angron's trick out of exhaustion. He had employed it himself, out of desperation. The angel had traded blood for opportunity. With a final violent burst of motion, Sanguinius gripped the dreadlock-like cable sprouting from Angron's head. The butcher's nails. They had never been merely attached to Angron's brain. They had replaced it, chewing away at cranial organs and mimicking their function in specific ways to drive the Primarch into berserk fury. As a demon, the malicious device had bonded with Angron on an even more intimate level. So when Sanguinius began to rip the cabling from the back of his brother's head, it was his brain, his essence, even his eyes that came with them. The Lord of Red Sands tried to escape in sudden desperation, launching into the air, but it was far too late. His agonizing destruction could not be avoided. By tearing the great locks of the butcher's nails from his former brother's head, the angel had inflicted a wound the demon could never regenerate from. Or perhaps not a wound at all, but a simple severing of the demon's consciousness from its body. Whatever the reason, the Red Angel was sent screaming back into the warp, unable to trouble the physical world for millennia to come. His body sent tumbling to the earth, no longer driven by demonic habitation. The imagery and the psychic backlash of their father's destruction broke something within the World Eaters. They lost the little semblance of control that had been at least pointing them in the right direction. The furious Space Marines turned on anything that moved. Their allies, their foes, each other. It would not be enough to turn the battle, but it did allow the Blood Angels to shepherd their wounded, but still very much alive, father into the final fortress and seal its gate. Death would soon come for them all, mortal and Primarch alike, but Sanguinius would not die that day. Whew! This has been Fightmaster. I'm Precognition. I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what other fights you'd like to see broken down.